Consumers increasingly say that the brands that they buy, they want them to have sustainable practices. And not only that, in many cases, they are willing to pay more for those particular brands. 39% of folks surveyed in a recent Stifel report say that it's very important that brands operate sustainably. Jim Duffy is joining us now. He's Stifel Sports and Lifestyle Brands Analyst who helped to put together this report. I mean, I guess it's not surprising on a certain level, Jim. We hear a lot of talk about sustainability everywhere, but what are some of the numbers that stood out to you from that survey in terms of the importance that people are now putting on it?
Yeah, you bet. Good morning. Thanks for having me on your show. So Stifel had a thesis that sustainability was increasingly important to consumers as they make decisions between brands. We conducted a survey of 11,500 consumers across 6 different markets. And fortunately, and indeed, consumers do think that sustainability is important to their decisions. 4 of 5 consider sustainability when choosing between brands. Nearly 60% of U.S. consumers research the sustainability of brands when making brand purchase decisions. So this is increasingly becoming a factor in consumers' purchase behavior. And we think it's going to be a source of competitive separation for many of the brands in the space.
Jim, Nike and Under Armour not on this list of, I guess, no surprise, of being sustainably focused companies. At what point does that impact their stock price?
Yeah, so we conducted the survey with a list of 50 brands, and I'll say that each of the 50 brands are good actors, so it's a tough comp set. Nike and Under Armour did score well in the top 10 with consumers for social sustainability. They don't score as well for ethical business practices and environmental practices as some of the other brands, and so they didn't make our top 10 list overall. Each of them, and many of the legacy brands, have sustainability agendas and platforms that they're kind of retrofitting legacy supply chains, legacy business practices, and so forth to be more accommodative of consumers' sustainability interests.
You know, Jim, I thought it was really interesting. Some of the names on the list don't jump out to me as necessarily, paragons of sustainability, even if they might have sustainable practices. Is that so? In other words, there's this sort of continuing thread about a company's branding and sustainability and its actual sustainability. How do you think these companies are doing on that front in terms of the actual sustainability?
Well, so to be clear, Julie, this is consumer perceptions of brands' sustainability. And so what you see on our leaderboard is a number of upstart brands started within the last 10 years, like Bombas, like Allbirds, like Rothy's, for whom sustainability is central to their branding platform. There are also some leading outdoor brands like Patagonia and the North Face who've been vocal advocates of environmental causes for a number of years. And then some forward-thinking legacy businesses like Adidas that have very evolved sustainability platforms. And so, there's a different, what we saw in our survey work was there's a difference between companies' actual sustainability practices and how consumers are perceiving them. Some of the companies that have very good sustainability underpinnings aren't doing as great a job of communicating that to consumers, and I think that suggests opportunity.
Jim, as you think about some of the actual practices here, one that stood out and ranks, obviously highly is Bombas, where, you buy a pair and they donate a pair. And I'm reminded of Tom's shoes from back when they were kind of top of the world. You bought a pair and they donated a pair. And there were always questions around how green exactly that really was. And I'm curious how, Bombas sort of squares that circle, perhaps, against that kind of backdrop.
Yeah, Bombas was the top performing brand in our sustainability index overall. And I think that shows that consumers appreciate their attention to social causes, donating a pair to homeless shelters for every pair purchased. Of course, more pairs of product is less environmentally friendly, but there are 2 other dimensions to this survey beyond the environmental component, that being the social component and the ethical business practices, and Bombas scored particularly well in each of those.
Jim, outside of the survey, I was checking out your coverage list. You have 11 buys and 7 holds out of the companies that you cover. To me, that's a pretty optimistic outlook on the consumer in the back half of this year. What stocks are the best ones for investors to own if they want to play this economic recovery for back to school and the holiday shopping season? Sure.
As you know, consumers are, for the most part, quite flush with cash right now. There's a lot of pent-up consumer spending. We like Nike as a company well positioned to benefit from what should be a strong back-to-school period. Nike has made significant investments in digital competencies, inventory management. Columbia Sportswear is another name where we think they're particularly well positioned into the second half of the year. Inventories in that category squeaky clean. There will be good purchases from their wholesale customers into the year, and they should see consumers return to their outlet centers. So those are a couple of our favorites.
And Jim, just in 30 seconds, these companies that are viewed as more sustainable, are they trading at a premium to the others, and are they worth that, the ones that are public anyway?
They are, and I do think that they're worth that. Oftentimes what you see is the brands with leading sustainability practices are there's a lot of commonality between that and the best managed companies. Those companies that have the wherewithal to be thoughtful and ahead of the curve on sustainability oftentimes are thoughtful and ahead of the curve on a lot of things. We've used sustainability like investments in digital and e-commerce 10 years ago, 8 years ago. Those companies that are making those investments today, we think are going to create competitive separation from those who are lagging.